Hello and welcome back to another episode of Only a Bag, a travel podcast. I am your host, Nathaniel Mellor, and with me is co-host Darcy.
I'm a co-host now.
She has agreed to show up for podcasts, which I think at the beginning we had originally planned to do podcasts together, and she just got a bunch of painting. She's a painter, artist, painter, not maybe house painter, but though you've painted houses.
I have painted houses, but not professionally.
So she didn't have the time to help, and I was like, "Oh, I'll just go ahead, and if you ever want to jump in on a podcast with me, you can." But now that she has time, we figured we can keep going together.
It's very exciting.
Very
exciting news.
So today we are going to talk about
food in Rome.
Just a little bit of action.
A little bit of
Cibo. That is, I'm so sorry for all the Italians out there listening. We're going to butcher your language in this episode. So before I guess we get into actually talking about food, I think anytime you talk about food, it's important to first discuss allergies. Of course, if you have allergies, you are probably well aware on how to deal with them. You've probably dealt with them your entire life, and you are no stranger to them. However, the reason we wanted to bring this up is because the both of us are vegetarians, and it can be difficult. And we're not vegetarians for health reasons, so it's not.
It's not dire, but, we do have to acknowledge it whenever we go places.
Right. And it's not an emergency if somebody accidentally serves us meat. It's not like, oh, I need an EpiPen, I'm going to die. It's more of just like, oh, bummer. And the reason I bring this up is there are a kind of especially where we are in the South, there's a bit of a misunderstanding sometimes.
Yeah, of what meat is. Even today, we were asking if there was meat in something, and they explained, oh, it's just tuna.
Right. And I think somebody else asked, he was offering us a snack. He said, you can get these, right? Because they only have pancetta. They're like little pancetta inside of like little crackers, basically. And I said, no, we actually can't eat pancetta either. Not can't, we don't. And he's like, really? No pancetta?
Yeah, there's something that we've dealt with a lot here is people trying to give us little bits of meat. They're like, oh, it doesn't count. It's just a little bit. That happened with a friend of ours who has celiac and is gluten-free. People often try to offer him breadcrumbs on things. They're like, oh, it's just a little bit of bread. But obviously that's a very big deal for him. And
I'll throw in as an addition, people here obviously know what celiac is, and they understand like dire food allergies. It's just if you are going to go out to eat, one thing we've heard of that people do that have allergies is to print it out in whatever language you're going. So for Rome it would be Italian, and to print it on a card and have the card laminated if you can, and just say I'm really allergic to these things, whether it be fish or eggs or dairy or gluten or shellfish, or I know one person who's allergic to citric acid or citrus in general, but which includes citric acid, which is obviously used as a preservative in a number of foods. So it's just if you do have that
need,
if you have that need to basically clarify your allergies when you go out to eat, it could be helpful to have some kind of physical card that you can show someone, or that they will show the chef.
Mm-hmm. And definitely try to learn in whatever the local language is. So in Rome, it would be Italian, like Nathaniel said. Learn, the simple phrase for I don't eat this, I can't eat this.
Yeah, which might make your life much, much easier.
And safer.
That's always a plus, and safer. And the second thing, before I guess talking about food specifically, because we'll get into that a little bit, but maybe to first, if you've ever heard of any sort of Italian customs, a lot of them revolve around these long lunches, a lot of customs around food. And we figured it'd be maybe just interesting to throw in a little bit right here at the beginning of this podcast that does sort of prepare you for the custom.
Yeah, here it's a bit different than I think a lot of us might expect in America. I know in the States I tend to walk around with food a lot more than I do here. People sit for long lunches here and long meals, and it's really an experience and an endeavor. So I've adapted to really sitting and taking my time anytime I eat something, really. So in Rome, that would mean anytime I grab a little street food, we tend to sit with it. And enjoy that time. If we're at a restaurant, obviously we take our time. Actually, something on that note here, tables don't turn over at restaurants as frequently as they would in the States. So in the States, you might have how many sittings in a night?
2 or 3 per table usually, I think.
But here it's one generally, I think, especially in smaller towns. Maybe in big cities, people go a little faster pace of life. But it really is a whole deal. It's a few hours, really, whenever you're having a meal at a restaurant. And like I said, even if you're having a little street food, I think it's really, for me, it's important to take my time and really enjoy that experience.
Absolutely. No, I think it's a different, I think it's a different concept. I think maybe in America, a lot of times you eat, even fast food, it's a sort of concept. It's like you need food, you need it quickly, grab it and go and eat in your car or eat when you get home or something like that. And here, fast food is, obviously it's a thing all over the world, but I think there's a different, maybe consensus or maybe quality around it, in the sense of you're going to take it, not necessarily sit in your car or go home with it, but you're going to go to a park or a bench or just stand outside wherever you bought it and eat it there. Because there's still, even in bigger cities where it's less traditional, a big meal, for dinner or even for lunch is still a thing. It's still, you can expect to spend a couple hours at lunch or dinner. Even if you make a reservation, it's something we've noticed. It's, we'll make a reservation or try to make a reservation for a restaurant, and they'll say, no, we're kind of booked up. And it's like, it doesn't matter if you're like, well, I want my reservation for 10. They're like, no, we have no idea if people are going to still be sitting at 10. It's, they only make reservations to fill up the restaurants once. And then, if you come in and somebody's left, you can go and you can sit down. But typically you can only get about one, sitting out of each table. Unlike the States, I've worked as a waiter where you can get, 2 or 3 in a dinner period.
Mm-hmm. Should we also mention now that for people who don't know, when you go to a restaurant, I would say generally anywhere in Europe or most places outside of the US, but especially in Italy, the wait staff is not trained to, it's not a custom here to dote on customers or a table. Obviously, they're incredibly nice people, but essentially what they do is they ask you what you want, they bring you what you've ordered, and they kind of just leave you alone, which is the polite thing to do here because they expect you to want to chat and talk to the people at your table, not constantly ask for new things or need that much assistance, right?
Or to even ask, like, how's your food? How's everybody doing?
Right.
Do you need anything else? Can I get you something? Which is what I would do in America. But here, we've been to, there's a pizza restaurant in Naples that we used to really enjoy, Napoli, for anyone who speaks Italian. And we really liked it. And it used to have much better pizza than it is now, unfortunately. But when you sat down, you had your menu when you sat down, because the person who sat you down gave you a menu. And the waiter would come over, and as you're telling the waiter what you wanted, he usually was a guy. It was like, we're just taking the menu from you and walking away. So, it's like usually 3 steps away when you finish which pizzas you want, and like 6 steps away when you're yelling out like which beer you want. But it's a little bit different because he's like, his job is really just to be there to get your order from where you are sitting to the kitchen. Yes. And that's it. And he'll, bring by the beer or the pizza later. But yeah, like Darcy was saying, they're not there to make sure you're having a wonderful experience. They're just like, if you don't enjoy the food, yell at me. Flag me down, basically.
And if you need something, politely ask. You can put up a little hand, try to catch their eye. They know what they're doing and they'll notice you, but just try to be as polite as possible because it is a different custom here.
And before we get into the rest of this episode, I'm just going to run a very quick ad. It's going to sound different. I apologize if you've heard all the other ads. They do sound different because I had to record it off of a different microphone. So it sounds a little bit more garbled. But we will be back after that ad.
Welcome back from the ad break. We're going to talk about common street food, right? Is that what we're talking about next?
Yeah, street food, sort of like what you can expect to find. I guess like we can expect to find as more traditional Roman meals that are quick and easy to eat, as opposed to ones that are in restaurants. Though we will talk about those too. There are only a couple, the classic Roman foods that you should try. But I've always find it more interesting to know about a different country or different cities' street foods. It's sort of, I don't know, for me it's
Yeah, I mean, you and I are all about street food. And
Yeah.
I think part of it is because so often so many locals eat street food. I mean, regular local people do go out to restaurants, obviously, but I think you can really find like the soul of a place in the street food.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anthony Bourdain.
You want to start with pizza?
Pizza is a great beginning, I think. It is a classic beginning.
Should we clarify that pizza in Rome is a street food, but pizza in Naples, like Napolitano pizza, not really a street food. They are pretty different.
I'd even say that we're going to do a whole episode on pizza.
Yeah.
It's going to be a 30-minute long episode.
It's going to be an hour-long
It's
episode,
going
knowing
to be
you.
an hour-long episode. But as a very quick clarification, when in Rome, there are two major types of pizza. Pizza a taglio, which is pizza by the slice that you get at any pizza place that is like, you're supposed to take it and go. And there's pizza at restaurants, which sometimes are pizzas and sometimes they seem like they're pinzas, Pinsa, and that's more of a hard cracker with pizza toppings. It's a different type of flour as well. It's like a spelt barley wheat flour. I can't remember. It's a different kind of flour. And then there's pizza, but the pizza in Rome tends to also be very hard and cracker-like unless you go to a place that serves Napolitano pizza or sort of more northern pizza, which is kind of what we have in America. The pizza that you get like at maybe not Domino's, but like a nicer pizza place in America is going to typically be like a more northern style Italian pizza. There's not very many Napolitano style pizzerias in the States because it's a different concept, I guess. Not even different concept, different style of pizza.
It is, yeah.
But when we talk about pizza in this episode, we are going to be talking about pizza a taglio.
Yes. And Nathaniel, what is pizza at taglio?
Pizza, she's giving this to me because I'm very excited to talk about pizza. But it is basically it's a type of, it's pizza. And it's typically, when you go into a pizzeria that serves pizza a taglio, you will see these trays. Most of the trays tend to be about a meter long by a foot and a half wide, or they're basically 2/3 of a meter long, 2 feet long by 2 feet wide, more of a square. But there's these giant sheet pans of pizza, and they typically have one flavor per pan, 2, 3, 4 flavors per pan. But they also serve just bread, focaccia, which is just like bread with some salt and rosemary on it. And they serve all of these throughout the day normally, starting around like 9:30, 10 o'clock, you can start purchasing it, up until about, when they close at midnight.
And it's all fresh made. You can usually see the oven when you go to these places, so it's right from like 3 feet away.
Yeah, that's the, and the reason I mentioned even the flavors is because sometimes you might like want to try one of the more experimental flavors of like, it's got some really good sounding stuff on it. It has speck and radicchio and fungi, porcini or something like that. But that might be something they only make, twice a day. So if you don't time it perfectly, then it's gonna be a little cold and chewy. But something like the margherita pizza, which is just marinara sauce, usually some kind of mozzarella or caciocavallo or anything that's just melts well, and bread, they make that, what? Darcy's
Always
looking.
mozzarella.
Well, no, sometimes it's not mozzarella. I feel like depending where you go, it's a different types of cheese. I mean, here it's fior di latte.
Oh, I guess that's true.
Sometimes it's a type of cheese that looks and tastes a lot like mozzarella, but it's called fior di latte, It's also a flavor of gelato, which we'll talk about in another episode. But the margaritas, they usually make it like once every 15, 20 minutes because that's what is the most popular flavor. Mm-hmm. So if you go to the really busy spots, they keep pulling margaritas out of the oven to serve. And that's like, it's just hot, fresh from the oven, really nice. They cut it. My favorite bit of ever going to pizza Italia restaurants, because it was such a fun surprise, is like, there's that joke that the pizza cutter is the greatest invention ever.
Yeah.
Because it combines the wheel with sliced bread. And I always love that. But here, they don't actually use a pizza cutter that often. Sometimes they will. I will say sometimes if it's like a Napolitano style, they'll use a pizza cutter because it's so much easier and you're talking about very soft pizza. But they, in Rome, at the Pizza Italia places, typically use some kind of shears, like
garden shears.
Yeah. Garden shears, rose cutting shears. And that's exactly what they went to the hardware store and picked up some like just heavy duty shears. And they use that to cut the pizzas. But what they do is you when you go in, you order You just say, can I have a piece of pizza margarita, un pezzo di pizza margarita? And they'll say, yeah, yeah. And they'll point at it and they'll like basically gesture, how much do you want? And they know, I mean,
They know what a serving size is.
Yeah.
It's essentially slightly larger than the average person's hand.
Right.
It's almost like a sandwich size.
Yeah.
It's a good sandwich size. If you're an American, that's a good way to think about the size. And you can get a couple slices of the same flavor, a couple slices of two different flavors. They usually do, speaking of sandwiches, sandwich it if the two flavors will go together. And they'll let you know usually if the flavors don't go together. Same as gelato. We'll talk about that later. But most people in restaurants will know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
All people in restaurants will know what they're talking about, and they will kindly tell you if you're making the wrong choice.
They will, yeah. There will be some grumpiness, or some they will look a little bit sad that you might have offered that. But they will sandwich, they'll cut the pieces for you. Almost always toss it in the oven, for whatever it is, 15 seconds, just to get it warm. Pull them out, sandwich them together, wrap it in paper so a little bit's exposed, give it to you. And the price there, it's almost always done by weight. And it depends what flavors you get in this and that, but it goes from anywhere from €2, which is about $2.40, to €5 for a slice. Again, if you get something with like, tartufo, which is a truffle, and mozzarella di bufala and things like that, like really expensive ingredients, it will really be like a $7 piece of pizza. But if you go margarita, it's €1.50 maybe for a piece, €2. You can get two pieces, you sandwich it together. It's a really nice lunch for €4 or €5. And again, what we were talking about earlier in this episode was the fact that when people do take this food to go, they'll go stand right outside.
Right.
Maybe they find some church steps. Maybe they find a bench.
Right. If you're lucky, a park.
If you're lucky, a park. You can always, if you walk through, especially in Rome, if you walk through like Villa Borghese, sort of maybe around 1 or 2 o'clock, there'll be a number of people sitting on the benches having pizza or some other kind of food, especially around like Piazza del Popolo, because there's a couple different pizza Italio places.
Right.
And the Piazza del Popolo is a sort of, it's the big square with the obelisk in the middle. If you've ever seen pictures of Rome, it marks like the northernmost point of what people would consider the classic Roman area neighborhoods. It's like that sort of, once you go past it, you sort of go into a little bit newer, but still, mid 1800s, late 1800s, early 1900s.
The less touristic area is beyond the Piazza del Popolo.
Yeah, but a lot of people work over there, and they will buy pizza from over there and bring it into Piazza del Popolo because there are benches all around. I say square because piazza translates to square, but it's a giant circle. And there are benches around that people will, eat, and they'll have gelato or they'll have a pizza. And that's a really, really nice common food. And if you are there, especially by yourself, this is a good meal. Or with, if you have a travel partner or something like that, it is understandably maybe not the best meal if you have kids, only because it can be, a lot of the Pizza Italia places are not exactly the most well structured in the terms of having the inline and the outline. Sometimes it is just like everybody kind of goes to the counter and tries to get the attention of whoever's working. So if you have like kids or toddlers or young people, you're trying to hold their hands, it can be a little bit overwhelming, I think.
Yeah.
If you especially if it's, if you can have somebody outside with the kids and you're inside ordering, or vice versa. But if it's just like you and kids, or if two parents are going in ordering with their kids, it can be a little bit stressful.
Yeah.
Which at that point, you might want to definitely look for a restaurant and sit down, or and there are a number of places, I should add, if you do have kids, from what we've seen, there are a number of places, especially in the touristy areas, that do cater to children in the sense of offering much cheaper meals or meal packages. Obviously, there's always a kids menu, but I meant specifically like, you can get half a pizza and then a drink and something else, a little sweet for €5 or something. Our recommendations are not always going to be, in this podcast specifically, perfect for if you have children. However, I do think a lot of them can be amended slightly if you do have children, simply because they are, there are different options. Like there's a Pizza Italia place that's maybe a little less crowded. The one that we used to live next to would only have 1 or 2 people in there at a time, unless lunchtime. At the maximum, maybe 1 or 2 people. So if you have to pull, and there was always like somebody with a stroller inside or something like that. It always felt like it was a more neighborhood sort of pizza place. So you're always going to find something like that. It's just simply if you're in the middle of a crowd of people and you're like, wow, there's a line out this, this pizza place. We should definitely go try it. It is, although it might be very good pizza, it is not worth sort of throwing elbows to get to the front. Speaking of throwing elbows, this really actually might not be the best segue, but there is another type of not fast food, but street food that became very popular called trapezzino. And the food itself is synonymous with the name. I believe the guy who created it called it a trapezzino and named the place Trapezzino. But essentially, it's I'm going to kind of mess up this description, and I apologize to anybody who is devoutly enjoys this. But imagine you take traditional Italian/Roman dishes and you put it into a pizza pocket, and that's basically what some of these are: like eggplant, parmesan, cacio e pepe.
Stuffed into a lovely bread. It's really nice.
It's kind of, and it's open. It's an open pocket. It's not like pizza poppers or something.
It's essentially like an Italian pita pocket.
Yeah, it's an Italian pita pocket. It's a great description, and it's just traditional dishes shoved in a pita pocket.
Yeah, that's all it is. And you just eat it like a sandwich. A lot of these relate back to sandwiches. Maybe I just really like sandwiches.
We love sandwiches. A bit of a travesty because we don't eat meat, and we've been to so many places, and they'll do the different sandwiches. Like one, we were in Perugia, and they make this porchetta sandwich. There's this one stall sort of in the main area, and it's just basically it's like permanent stall, and they make these. Like every morning they have a new porchetta, a new pig. Basically, it's pig roast.
Stuffed with herbs and lovely things.
Yeah, and the outside skin is really crispy, and the inside is stuffed with herbs, and it's usually slow roasted for I don't know, it's supposed to be 24 hours or something. And they slice it up and they put it in a sandwich, and a lot of the ingredients are local, so it's like they might be with potatoes and apples, I think is one of the sandwiches.
Fennel is a big one.
Fennel, I think something with onions, and they look and smell amazing. So if you do happen to go to Perugia and have a porchetta sandwich, please let us know how it is.
It is something that they have in Rome as well, but it's maybe, to our experience, porchetta wasn't one of the biggest Roman street foods.
Yeah, and it maybe if you are Roman, you could tell us more. Our understanding of porchetta is it's more typical of the Umbria region. It's sort of a different sort of region gave birth to it, but it's still popular enough in Rome. But the trapezzino is another one. It's another very cheap food. In our experience, I believe it's a flat rate when we were there of €5 for any of the sandwiches. Obviously, if you do eat meat, that's the one you go for. It's one of these sort of like ridiculous things, but when I was eating meat, I was just sort of like, anytime there's a flat rate, I'm like, I'm not spending €5 on eggplant. I'm spending €5 on the beef stew you put inside of a pizza bucket or whatever. So it's just much better bang for your buck. Yeah. That being said, though, if I may go back to that, bring your children along. Maybe not the best meal for kids. It is hot, so they do scoop like hot. Whatever, like, eggplant parmesan or something like that into the pocket.
It's hot. It's a little messy. Yeah.
So if your kids are older, obviously totally fine, 10, 11. But if it's not something you maybe want to hand to your 4 or 5-year-old, it could be disastrous.
Trapezzino all over their little selves.
and you might have to blow on it first. But that's another great little super cheap street food, very easy. If you're out and about and you see it, might as well try it out. I put pinza, Pinsa, in that same thing as trapezzino, in the same category as trapezzino and as pizza Italia. They're very cheap, usually €4 or €5 for your own pinza.
Right.
And I say your own, it's the size of a dinner plate, maybe a larger dinner plate. And it's just a really nice meal, basically. It's just, if you just need a quick lunch somewhere, you typically will see a lot of business people outside having one just because it's €5 and it fills them up.
Yeah, it is incredibly filling. If you are doing the traditional tourist thing here, which is kind of just going all day, be aware that if you have a traditional Italian lunch or some of these street foods that we're recommending, you will likely need a nap afterwards.
100%.
They are amazing and filling and exhausting.
Which this isn't necessarily related to food, but if you are from we are from Savannah in Georgia in America, and there are public parks both squares and a giant public park in the middle of downtown. So it's not uncommon for people to have lunch and then go lay or sit in the park and have either a nap or just relax.
Right.
In our experience, it's not quite the same thing in Rome. Some people do go to the Villa Borghese, which is essentially a giant park. It is open to the public. I don't know if it's a public park. I don't know if it's private, if it's just open to the public. But people do lay there, but it's not the same. So sometimes if you have this big meal and you're like, I want to lay down. I don't really want to go back to my hotel room because maybe it's hot or the AC doesn't work or there isn't any AC or one of 100 reasons. Unfortunately, there are not many public places to just go and sit. Especially, I say if I keep going back to this, if you have kids thing, because we are trying to be aware for people who have kids, like, how do you slightly alter the same experience? And sometimes when you're exhausted after a heavy meal, your kids might not be, and they might want to run. And it's apart from one or two places, there aren't many places to let your kids go run and not run into a street or into.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point.
Something strange. But that kind of that almost wraps up the sort of street food. The last one to mention is one of Darcy's favorites.
Oh, it's my favorite. It's soupli. So, what to say about soupli? It's amazing. Number one. But there are two things. There's soupli and there's arancini. They are very similar in that they are fried rice balls, typically with cheese in the middle. But usually in Rome, you'll see soupli. It's more Roman. Arancini is actually Sicilian. But essentially, a soupli is, would you say it's like a large egg shape?
Yeah.
It's like so it's fried, and then inside of that is. I
will say it is fried with breadcrumbs. If you have celiacs, it's not something you can eat.
Yes, thank you for adding that. So it's fried breadcrumbs, and then rice, which is usually in like a tomato sauce or ragu. Ragu has beef in it, so do ask if that's something that you're concerned about. And then in the center is usually like this sort of gooey melted mozzarella bit, and you just kind of like crack it open, and apparently a lot of the arancini, they have different shapes. A lot of the soupli have different shapes, but the one that you'll find often in Rome is called al telefono, which is like an old school telephone, because when you open it up, you kind of crack it open and pull it apart. The cheese makes that sort of old school telephone cord. It's really silly, but it's so good.
Those are they are definitely up there. If you are if you like rice, if you like fried things, if you like fried things, by the way, Italy is a great country for fried things. But if you are like rice and I mean they're not quite a lunch, which is why I didn't put them in the same category. They're definitely more of a little snack. But it was especially when they're fresh out of the oil. Oh my God, they are amazing. And that's just that little thing that keeps you going.
And also kid-friendly, I would think. I'm imagining walking around with a stroller. You got a little kid in there. Crack it open. Make sure it's cooled down. Let them stuff their face.
Absolutely. It's also kind of easy to clean up because it does, although there's tomato sauce, it's a very not dry tomato sauce, I wouldn't say, but it's almost like they use a lot of, it's like tomato paste. So it's not wet or anything like that.
Right.
It's like the rice is like carnaroli or something that's like arborio, something that you'd make. What is that dish with the
risotto?
Thank you, risotto with. So it's very high in starch. It kind of pulls the tomato to itself. So it's not like, I don't want anybody imagining basically you crack it open, it's like sauce goes everywhere and cheese falls out.
It's actually remarkably tidy.
Yeah, it's a very tidy little meal. As far as sweets go, though, we were going to have I think our next episode was going to be on gelato because it's
Incredible. Amazing. One of the best things ever.
And it's this whole episode. It would be too difficult to really try to stick it all into one episode with other food because it's honestly a 25-minute conversation by itself, as is the pizza. But there are some sweets that are, if not from Rome, we're not entirely sure if some of these are from Rome, but they are popular in Rome. For instance, actually, this is definitely not from Rome, but tiramisu is from the north. It's from near Venice or from Venice. But there are places that, I'm a little bit biased. I gotta be honest. It's like there's a couple places that make their own that are really good in Rome.
Yeah.
But there's also one called like Pompey. That's a chain, not Pompeii. Pompey. It's a chain, and it's okay. It's just like A lot of people get it because it's super close to other.
Like tourist destinations is often where you'll find Pompi.
Yeah.
But on the note of tiramisu, semifreddi, which is like, it's a semi-frozen is what that means. If you've had tiramisu, it's about the same texture, but they come in lots of different flavors. And if you eat at like a sit-down restaurant, they will often have fairly local versions in different flavors.
It's like a cold and or partially frozen cream.
Yeah, it's like a frozen-y pudding thing.
They're usually very good.
Yeah.
But there's also things like maritozza con panna, which is kind of like maritozza is kind of like a brioche bun, more or less. And then panna is just Italian for whipped cream, not crema, which is it's more of a custard.
Yeah.
Panna is whipped cream. And basically what they do is they slice open a brioche bun and stuff it with cream and give it to you.
It's incredible, as you can probably imagine.
It is really good. But to our knowledge, we don't know of any other really traditional Roman pastries
If
or
you
sweets.
do, please let us know.
Please, seriously. And if you also live in Rome, please let us know where to get them. We'd be so ecstatic. There are pastry places, pasticcerias, places to buy pastries. But a lot of times, from our own research, our own very difficult, arduous, delicious research
Of walking around to different pastry shops.
Yes, they sort of pick and choose, like from Naples pastries and northern pastries, and
A little bit of French in there.
a little bit of French, a little bit of Bari city, not like anything else, just to clarify. But there's a couple different. They're kind of an amalgamation, basically, of other pastries, and they're all. But just to clarify, they're very, very good. I just don't know of any specific Roman pastries.
Yeah. Should we mention cornetti?
Yeah, we'll mention there are something called cornetti, and we'll mention that when we talk about drinks a little bit later. And it's basically a croissant, but it's an Italian.
It's an Italian croissant. Don't expect it to taste like a croissant. It tastes Italian.
It tastes Italian, and we'll let you know what that means when we talk about drinks coming up. And like I mentioned, there is gelato, but that's a different episode. But with a lot of this food, there are many places to buy it. But one general subset of places are markets. Sometimes,
markets.
We've spent hours and hours and hours and hours of our time in Rome looking for markets, looking for clothing markets, and we'll talk about that. That was something we also wanted to make a episode on later. But the used clothing markets, which are really popular here. But a lot of markets have somewhere to buy food.
Yeah, they do. Some of my favorite markets sell exclusively food.
Such as?
The ones I'm thinking of grocery markets.
We also like Mercato Testaccio.
Yeah.
Which is the Testaccio market. I don't know. I think Testaccio is the neighborhood, by the way. And if you have been to Rome already, they did change their location about 4 years ago. They are now in an old, I don't even know what it is, but it's a sort of indoor-outdoor building. It's one of those weird things where it's a bunch of stalls in a building, but there's no roof. So it's sort of indoor-outdoor. It's a little strange. But they sell a mix of like Italians. I mean, it's hard to explain because it's like some of it's Italian goods, but I mean like it's the market. I should say. Let me preface this with the market is more geared for people who are Roman or who live in Italy, who live in Rome. So it's not like you're going to find a lot of touristy things. It's a very functional market. There are people who sell clothes that they made. There are people who sell like shirts that they've screen printed on. There are people who. One stall is a little vegetarian store, which is very rare for Rome, I should say.
But it's so packed with products. Yeah. Oh my goodness, yeah.
It is incredibly packed with products. There's a few other like goods stores. They sell things, they don't sell food.
It's almost like a fun, modern, hipster flea market.
Or mall.
But local stuff.
A lot of it's local. But one of the big drawing points is the food. We talked about suppli and arancini earlier. There is one stall that does make it fresh in the sense of it's already been rolled and made into balls and then put breadcrumbs around it.
By them.
By them,
yeah.
Yes. and they will fry them for you when you order it. So it's everything you order is fresh fried, from what you order to your mouth.
Yeah, and then right around the corner from that, meaning it's 2 stalls away essentially, is a fresh pasta. So there you can get like a plate of pasta to eat in the market, or you can get fresh pasta to take home.
And on that note, I will add, it's a very common thing to see, and we'll talk about this in a little bit in a second. I'll revisit this when we talk about groceries, but there are a number of fresh pasta places in Italy, in Rome, in probably the neighborhood you'll be staying in. And by and large, this is a general statement, but most of them will either sell you pasta by the pound or by the kilo, but if you're an American, it's by the pound, or they will make it for you like a little dish, whether it be tomato sauce or pesto or something.
Aglio olio.
Aglio olio, which is garlic and oil. So this stall in the Mercato Testaccio, basically they usually have 2 or 3 different sauce options, plus ravioli, regular pasta, and then they usually make a couple like dishes, like a little pasta salad or something like that. And of course you can buy, they also do make dry pasta that you can take with you and bring home as a gift. And they have fresh pasta that you can buy there by the kilo, by weight. Mm-hmm. And you can, if you are renting an Airbnb, you can take it back and cook it for dinner.
Yeah, it is a really great, like, sort of fun local thing to do if you're visiting.
Well, that's the thing. Again, this is this sort of like €5 lunches Darcy and I are really into, because €5 is sort of like a really good median point for lunch in Italy. You would be trying to spend more than that, because then it's like, this has to be really good, or something that there's no chance we can make it ourselves. But that's the thing. We got a plate of ravioli, and it had like a garlic lemon sauce, I think, on it, or maybe it was like
so good.
Lemon with the ricotta in the ravioli, and just like then it was like garlic and pepper, red hot pepper sauce, like red pepper, not like Tabasco. And that was, it was really delicious. It's really, especially if you've kind of been walking around for an hour, you need something to eat. There's a slices of pizza. We talked about pizza Italia, that's there. We talked about the supli arancini, those are there. Fresh pasta that you can have made for you there, as well as just other, more slightly generic foods, in the sense of, I think there is a stall that sells hamburgers and fries, because there are a couple places that do serve fries there. Donuts.
Yeah, there were donuts there. There's also little pasticcerie,
the
little sort of sweets for after your lunch or before, if you want to be crazy.
If you want to be really crazy. And then, of course, there are places to buy, beer while you're eating and coffee when you're done.
Right.
But that's the kind of experience that we like, because that market specifically is only on Saturday. But I believe, or no, is it all week?
No, it's all week.
I am sorry, it is all week.
Do check the times, though. They have an odd day off, like a Thursday or something they have off. But on that note, actually, it is very confusing to keep track of the market times in Rome specifically, because there are quite a few that we're going to talk about, but they all have different hours, different days they're open, different days off. So you might need to make a list and keep notes. Especially because, for instance, the Mercato Testaccio might be open 8 to 8 throughout the week, let's just say, if it is. I think it's closed, like you said, Thursday. But the stalls have their own hours. Some of them are not open the same time the market is. And that's what we noticed, especially 2 years ago, so it was 2020. It wasn't really the height of COVID at all. It was sort of the summer when all the cases sort of dipped. But still about half of the stalls were open. This past summer, much fewer cases, and more things were open. I'm saying that because there probably is no relation. It just might just be that we went to at a different time this year as we did last year. But more and more should be opening up. But no, there are other markets. One we won't really talk about in this episode too much is the Porta Portesi market. It's a very famous flea market. Portesi door. Porta means door, gate. Portesi gate market. They don't have a whole lot of food going on there, though. It really is more of that real flea market vibe. Used clothes, antiques.
New clothes.
Weird tchotchke things. It's really interesting. Interesting place.
Yeah. It's more of like one of those things you show up with €50 and just kind of go wild, and then see what you end up with. But there are a couple like random little like food truck type things. But going back to that porchetta we talked about, the pork with the roasted with the herbs inside, that you'll see there a lot.
We had a hard time finding food that was vegetarian at that market.
Yeah.
Because it at that market, I do feel like the food is there for sustenance. Like, you've been here all morning, you're surviving on one coffee and maybe a cornetto. You need some food.
Yeah, it's a definitely a little bit more of a, this is an emergency, pick me up. But there are a couple other markets as well. The Testaccio is our favorite just for walking around and food. But there are a couple, as Darcy was mentioning earlier, her favorite ones are food only markets.
Yeah. Is it Escolino that I like?
Yeah.
Love Escolino. It's just as a preface, I'm someone with a lot of anxiety, especially in large crowds, but I'm able to kind of get through it in these markets. But if you're someone like that, prepare yourself. Some of them can get quite crowded, quite crazy. At Escolino, it is, you know more of the history about it, but right now it's essentially a bunch of fruit vendors, a bunch of fishmongers, pescarie. Is that the right word?
I think so.
Yeah. Like random food stalls, and it's a big building and they're just packed in there. And sometimes the vendors will shout at you to try to get you to come to their stalls. But it's sort of atypical food often, food that you wouldn't find in Italy, meaning it's not atypical in that it's not something you wouldn't find somewhere else. But in Italy, we find it hard often to find things that are not specifically Italian. Things other than pasta, tomatoes, and cheese.
Even if even if sometimes things are grown in Italy, it can be difficult to then find those things in Italy. I mean, I don't know if you've ever. This is a little bit completely off topic, but if you've ever bought yarn, or if you're a knitter, or if you're somebody who crochets, and you go, like we were in Scotland and we went to the yarn store and we found all this, lamb wool and sheep wool and this and that, all this yarn, all made in Italy. But here, you can't find any of that. You can find this like acrylic, cheap, sort of made in Eastern Europe, made in China, just really bad sort of quality, unless you go to like specialty stores, but then it's like you're almost paying more.
There is a stall coming up soon at a different market that has entirely Italian yarn. I will make a note of that because that is very important. But yeah, the Escolino market can be a little anxiety inducing, but they have such fun food, lots of different vendors.
I will say, or if I may add really quickly, to best, I think, talk about the Escolino market, Esquiline neighborhood is basically the neighborhood around Termini, which is the main train station. And it has become a bit of, a lot of people basically consider it the immigrant neighborhood in their head. It's if you've ever stepped outside of the train station, it's a lot of like kebab shops and sort of, there's pizza kebab and sort of pasta places, but a lot of it is sort of, if you're going to get Indian food, you're probably going to be in the Esquilino neighborhood, or something like that. It's not. It's a lot of a-traditional sort of meals. It's non-traditional meals for Italy.
Non-traditional Italian, yeah.
Yeah, for Italy, not for the world. So that market, I believe, like you're saying, the history. I don't know that much of the history. I will clarify, but it's a very old market. A long-running market, and they've recently moved indoors into a new location in the last 5 or 6 years. But it is maybe longer than that, maybe 10 years. But it has kind of become, in a really interesting way, more of an immigrant market in the sense of if you need things like yucca root, or if you need okra, or if you need cilantro, which is not a thing in Italy. Yeah. We have found cilantro at like 4, maybe 5 different places in all of Italy, and it's a very difficult thing to find, which is only surprising because it's used all the time in Turkish cuisine, it's used all the time in Greek cuisine, and it's the climate for it. You can grow it in Sicily, you can grow it in southern Italy, but it's not used here.
Plantains. Lots of plantains in the market.
There are a couple Caribbean stalls. There are a number of sort of Indian subcontinent. I don't know what the general term is. I apologize if that's not the right one. But this sort of Bangladesh, Pakistan, India,
you'll find like great
Nepal,
spices by bulk, grains, beans, in bulk.
A lot of imported vegetables. There's a couple like specifically Chinese food stalls that import a lot of vegetables like lotus root, certain kinds of bok choy. So there's that kind of, if you're looking to get really creative, and a lot of this we should throw in is ingredients. These are if you have an Airbnb and you're going to be cooking,
right?
Or if you're just kind of curious and you want to get a vibe of some place that is very non-traditional on your normal adventures through Rome. It is predominantly almost all ingredients. There are definitely some stalls that sell olives if you are interested in olives. There are some stalls, and we'll get to this in a second, that do sell wine. There are stalls that sell bread and things like that. Cured meats. If if you're just gonna if you're the kind of person who wants to make a kind of couple of sandwiches while you're there with some bread, cheese, and meat, that's a great place to go and stock up on that kind of stuff. It's all sliced fresh. It's sliced in front of you.
And around that market, you can find definitely Indian food restaurants. You can eat there, take away. China food markets, Chinese restaurants. So if you're looking for something not Italian, you can usually find it in that neighborhood.
Especially, actually, there's a couple of ones. I think it's just called Asia Market, I think. But it's the one we like to go to for like soy sauce and miso and
fun drinks.
So I think they were running a promo last time we were there, and they're giving away. He's giving us drinks to take. The guy who's running it, not like some random person standing outside. But no, there are. I mean, I would say this because obviously, depending where you're coming from, it might not be very interesting to be like, I just had Indian food before we went. But we've been here a while, and we've been in Italy for a couple of years now, and it's sometimes you're just like, I would kill for something that is not Italian food. I would, and it's not to say Italian food's bad. It's honestly very good. It's just,
we love Italian food.
It can just get a little bit overwhelming. And then when you finally have like a bite of curry or like some sort of hot oil noodles, and then you're just sort of like, oh my God, I forgot what the rest of the world's food tasted like. It can really be an emotional experience. So if you are interested in buying groceries, the Esquilino market, as you're saying, is a great option.
Yeah.
And across the street from that, though, in the same market.
Across the street from the same market?
No.
What?
I was prompting her, and it did not work, is a bunch of fabric.
Oh, yeah, in the same market. It's a separate building. There are a lot of different kinds of fabric. You can, I think, find some ready-made clothes. I believe there are some saris there in a stall for sale. You can find fabric from India, Africa, things like that. It's quite fun. A little expensive for me, unfortunately. And also I didn't have a sewing machine in Rome, but super fun to walk through. A great place to buy fabric if you can. Another famous Roman market is Campo dei Fiori. And you and I have only been there a couple of times. I think we've passed its heyday, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. We went like once during the middle of the week, and I think we went once on a Saturday. It could be that Sunday is the day to go. Mm-hmm. So take this with a grain of salt, for sure. It is traditionally a flower market. It is the longest running market in Rome. I think it's a couple hundred years. I mean, it's got this sort of really long history. And I think it's one of those markets as well. I could be wrong. There are a couple markets. By the way, I just do want to add too, there are markets we won't be talking about simply because we would be here all day if we're going to talk about all the markets. We're just naming some that we find interesting and some that are popular.
Right.
But the Campo dei Fiori is a sort of really long-running, long-standing market, but it has become a little bit it caters to a touristic crowd, I guess. Mm-hmm. So you go there and it has a lot of like, Italy-shaped pasa and
fresh squeezed fruit juice. There's like 5 fresh squeezed fruit juice stalls.
Right, which is like, but none of the juice is. Almost none of those fruits were in season. Like you'll often see things
or grown in Italy or anything like that.
Yeah, and so it's a little bit sad, I think, in a certain sense. Not sad because like, oh, you shouldn't have touristy things, but just it's. I think originally it was it's with flowers and this and that. It was this big ordeal, and I think now it's sort of like a couple of people aggressively yelling for you to come over and buy a tiny bottle of olive oil that may or may not be from Italy. And also get a $12 fruit juice and then leave.
Right.
But it's still kind of, if you want to, there's also very expensive places to have a drink in that same square. But if we went, I don't know, like 6 feet outside of the square and found a cafe that, had normal €1 coffee.
Right.
Which is phenomenal.
Right.
So it is, if you do go to Campo dei Fiori, I'm the only reason I'm putting this out there is to sort of maybe bring your expectations a little low.
It's the one that you will find if you look up market in Rome, like on Yelp. You will be suggested to go to Campo dei Fiori. But I think, in my opinion, you're better served to go to one of the other ones we've mentioned if you're tight on time. If not, go check all of them out.
Definitely. But the last one to mention that might be out of your, a little bit out of the way, unless you're going to the Vatican and unless you want to go take a walk around the area the Vatican is in afterwards, is the market is in Prati, Prati, that's the neighborhood. And it's called the Trionfale? Non lo so. But it's Mercato Trionfale or Trionfale, and it's a pretty massive market.
Completely indoors. It's, again, this sort of stall setup, but it is very much an indoor place. Places to eat, places to get regular vegetables. That's the place that has the yarn stall. So if you're interested in yarn, there actually are a couple, but one specifically, there's just entirely yarn made in Italy, all kinds of cool stuff, great colors, lovely person.
It's one of those markets that is very much caters to the surrounding area,
Right.
Which is Prati tends to be kind of a wealthier, a little bit more upscale kind of crowd. Still a very international upscale crowd, if I
Right.
may. The neighborhood itself, you're going to find falafel, and you're going to find kind of specialty stores, and you're going to find sort of Middle Eastern stores. I already mentioned falafel, but it's a still kind of an international area, but a little bit more upscale.
Right.
So that market, not so much. It doesn't reflect it so much in its produce, like we talked about. Esquilino Market has the has like cilantro and yuca,
More
and,
international
Yeah.
flavors and ingredients, yeah.
but it does what we've experienced is those. The reason we really liked going there is because all the farms there, or not all, but the 4 that we went to are local farms. They're just outside of Rome.
Yeah.
They bring in their stuff every morning, or their new stuff every morning. They leave produce there overnight, obviously. And I mean, it's like, it's a lot of them. You kind of just fill up a bucket with, onions and tomatoes and cucumber. I mean, I think our favorite stall, and I wish I had the name of it, but they have a couple baskets of things that are either misshapen a little bit, like carrots that are small or weird, or eggplant that just split, and it didn't rot or anything. It just kind of split open and it dried that way. So it's not
all those funky looking real vegetables,
Yeah,
really
and
cool.
they charge like half price for those. But we've gone and bought like just buckets of food from them,
Yeah.
and end up paying like €7 because it's basically because it's in season. A lot of they grow outside of Rome, so it has to be in season, and you can't really be charging €30 for something because you need to be moving it before it rots.
Right.
But we really like those, and the other reason we really like this market, apart from all the other fantastic bakeries, and they have porchetta, and they have pasticerias and this and that, but they also have a couple of places, 2 specifically, that we know of, that we like, that do sell wine by the liter.
Yes, and it's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's really fantastic. One has a sister stall in that Esquilino market we talked about. I said I'd mention the wine later, but they have 2 stalls, one in Prati and one in Esquilino. And I mentioned that because if you happen to, let's say, go to the one in Prati, you get a bottle of wine that you like, and you happen to be near Esquilino later, you can just pop in there and get probably the same bottle or the same. They do. If you are a tourist, I don't expect you to be bringing your own liter bottle around, because what they do is most people do bring their own liter bottle.
It's real eco-tourism there, bringing your own glass bottle around with you.
You could bring a water bottle if you wanted to and just fill that up.
Well, maybe.
But they do give you a plastic bottle and with a cap, and that's your wine. But we really like those because most of those have a couple local wines and a couple not so local wines. Local. They're all Italian wines. Just
They had some French wines.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I guess they did.
And on that note, do your best, if you can, to ask for local things, is my suggestion. At the wine stalls, at the vegetable stalls, people will be excited to give you things that are local and or in season, and it really is, obviously, the better product.
Yeah. I mean, it does... And I know it's one of those things that people say that all the time, like, oh, once you've had a local, you'll never go back.
Right.
And I'm like, I still will buy stuff from like sub-Saharan Africa because I can't get mangoes in Italy.
Oh, 100%. I think you and I will still buy avocados, guys. Sorry, they're not always grown here.
We're trying to start like a petition or something, like please grow avocados in Sicily. I don't know. Not that I mean, we're very selfish in the sense of I'll have like 6 avocados and I'm like, that was enough. That was plenty. But I really want them to be available. I think it's just... it's not as grocery stores in Italy are not as I think in America, we are used to having everything all the time, no matter the season.
Right.
Whether it be berries, which are only grown and harvestable in a very specific time of the year, whether it be certain kinds of squash that only pop up in the winter, whether it be things like kale or collard greens or broccoli rabe, citrus. In Italy, typically speaking, even big grocery stores adhere pretty hard to a seasonal growing period. And they sometimes, depending where you are, Rome, again, is a great example of some grocery stores in Rome will still have berries, but they'll be extraordinarily expensive because they had to import them from somewhere that's growing berries. But usually, especially in markets, they won't have too many things that you can't find near. However, like you're saying, just asking, is this, do you have any local wine? They usually also get very excited. People get very excited. They want to show you things. They're like, actually, this is our local production. Let me show you this one.
Yeah. Local cheese, actually, as someone who really enjoys cheese and tries to do so responsibly, asking for local cheese is, I think, a great way to experience the subtleties or not so subtleties in different food, especially, simply the difference between Italian cheese and French cheese and then American cheese worlds away. And then different Italian cheeses just by region are incredibly different. And I think it's a really interesting way to get some insight into the different culture and agricultural practices.
For sure. And again, Rome is different than a small town, because in a small town you will absolutely find like some old guy, in the back of his Fiat, and he's
got some cheese covered in hay.
He's got some cheese covered in hay, and he's like, it's €3 for this round of cheese, and it is not pasteurized milk, and he's definitely touched like the ground when he was making this cheese. So it's something that maybe you should, put on like grilled cheese sandwiches. But some parts of Italy still do have that like very local, like very, very local. But Rome, like you were saying, has that a little less grungy. It's a little bit more like they have a actual operating cheese production, stainless steel vats, and proper cleaning procedures. But they do, it is made in Rome or just outside of Rome or in the region in Lazio around Rome. And it's quite, it's really, I guess people really enjoy sharing like things especially with tourists, because there's still that level of like, oh, you're not from here. Like, and you're asking me for something local. And it's like, yeah, I'm, everyone talks about, whatever Rome, where I'm from. Everybody talks about whatever, cheese, Italian wine. Like
a lot of the people we have talked to, just generally in Italy, Italians are excited to share their culture, especially through food.
Mm-hmm. So if you are looking to spend some money, you're okay, and we sometimes we'll visit a place for a week and we'll just kind of stock up on stuff like that. And then like cheese, and we try to eat as much as possible, but sometimes it can be difficult because, we're only there for a couple days, we're only there for a week. And then they were so excited. They gave us like, especially at, green grocers, we've noticed that they'll kind of keep sticking stuff into bags, and I'm like, no, I said, oh my God, I said that was it. And like, no, you got to try this. You got to try this. And I'm like, I'm staying in a hotel. What am I going to do with a head of cabbage? I have no plans on eating cabbage raw. So it can be a little bit, challenging to figure out how to use some of these things. But if you are in a market, if you are looking, it's a very non-typical thing to do. And I say that we're saying a lot of this, to kind of to prepare people, because sometimes we'll check reviews or whatever, and it's like people are angry, and I'm like, how are you angry? It's not designed for you. It's designed for somebody living here. You wanted to go and, you thought it was a wine bar, and you thought you were going to be getting a glass of wine and some food, but instead they're asking you where your liter bottle of wine is, and you get angry, and then you leave a bad review, and it's like, no, it's not for that. I will say, however, they will not let you buy anything without you first trying it, even if you've been there before and tried it before. We went at like 10 in the morning to stock up on stuff.
Nathaniel got drunk on wine samples.
Super drunk on wine samples.
Not intentionally, by the way. They just kept giving them to us.
Yeah, they're like, we should try this one. And this is a pecora. This is pecorino. This one's a, Alianico. This is a primitivo. This is a... And I'm like, oh my God, I didn't have any food. This is an empty stomach.
Don't go expecting to get drunk. It just sometimes it's a happy accident sometimes in this country.
I also cannot handle any alcohol. So it is, I'm 3 drinks, 3 tiny little sippy cups into the wind. And I'm just... out of it. But on the topic really quickly of groceries, because we figured it'd be, just if on the off chance you are staying in an Airbnb, because it does seem more popular these days, and a lot of Airbnbs do have a place for you to cook your own meals. And I mean, when we go visiting places, especially for more than a couple nights, it does, like, the money kind of starts to, the price of things kind of starts to rack up, basically. And It's just like, oh my God, I can't keep going out to eat. Also, if you are someone who has dietary needs, or just, like we mentioned, allergies, could be just a low salt diet, things like that. It could be easier to eat in, especially if you have kids. We mentioned that a lot earlier as well. But it can be something that's just like, let's just make something super simple at the house. Go out and get some groceries and bring them back. And that can sometimes be the easiest of two options. And with all of this, I basically very quickly, we wanted to give you a primer on Italian grocery stores, but specifically Roman grocery stores, because it sort of combines the Italian grocery store with a very big city. And with a big city comes small, packed grocery stores that are, depending where you go, that don't have like the biggest possible selection
or aisles. Ooh, don't expect large grocery carts, especially when you're in a big city. If you're from a big city in the US, you might already be used to this, but they are tight aisles. You will have to carry things in your arms or in your little
basket.
Yeah, thank you.
But the few things we wanted to very quickly mention is that grocery stores typically have very few items, like we already said, but they might have a lot in that same variety. And I want to, like, again, it's hard if you're not from Italy, if you've never been here. Obviously, grocery stores are kind of designed differently. Like, usually, even in big grocery stores, one entire aisle is dedicated to pasta. Like in America, we'd have an entire aisle dedicated to, cereal or something, or snacks or chips. But here, it's one entire aisle, both sides, pasta. You'll have half of an aisle with olive oil. A little bit more, maybe, of that will be like vinegars and things like that. Baking items. There's a lot of tomato sauces and tomatoes in jars, tomatoes in cans.
Beans.
A lot of beans.
So you can subsist on a grocery store. Obviously, we're not saying that you can't find what you would need to eat in a grocery store, but they are a bit different than you would expect in the U.S.
Absolutely. And it's to definitely check before you go what they have available, because it's also like in America, we have typically, right, you have the meat counter, you have a deli counter, and you might have, like, I don't know, sometimes a bakery or something. And here, there's the bakery. The meat counter is usually not fresh meat. It's almost always cured meat and cheeses, and that usually is always also the baker, where they give you the bread as well. There is sometimes, depending where you go, a fish section, depending how big the grocery store is.
Right.
Not always. But it's just to sort of, if you are going to try to think about eating at home or eating at your Airbnb, is to do a little pop your head in, see what's there, make some sort of mental notes, like, oh, okay, they don't sell, hamburgers, kind of out of the question. They don't really sell anything for hamburgers. Pasta dishes, obviously possible. They have a pretty decent frozen section, oftentimes.
A sandwich is possible.
So that's just something to kind of keep in mind, that if you...
Peanut butter, though, guys. Peanut butter is not a thing here. You're not going to have a peanut butter sandwich or peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You could have a jelly sandwich.
There is a lot of jelly. There's not a lot of peanut butter.
Yes.
If they do have it, I'm very serious about my peanut butter. I really like the sort of, I definitely crunchy. I can go smooth, but I like those natural ones with the oil on top that you have to mix up. But here, the very, very rarely when they do have peanut butter, it will be like Peter Pan or Jif or something like that. And it's just that sort of oily, creamy, very Americanized peanut butter.
And even that is rare to have.
Yeah. And the same thing with cereal. There is a cereal selection. There is milk. The cereal selection is not as big as it is in America. It also tends to be, cereal tends to be a children's meal here, a kid's meal. Well, because it's a lot of chocolate, like chocolate puffs and Choco Puffs and chocolate beans.
They are marketed towards young children and families with young children. Yeah.
Sometimes you'll see like cornflakes. Sometimes you'll see some sort of muesli. Sometimes you'll see, which is not a cereal, but I think we can safely put it in the cereal category. You can sometimes see other stuff, but if you're like, oh, I have a bowl of cereal every morning, you might have to shift a little bit now that you're visiting Italy. But the other important thing is cashiers. We mentioned with servers in restaurants, they're just there to take your order and bring it to the chef. Cashiers are simply there to get your money. Not like they're not going to scam you out of your money, but like their job is simply
They're there to check out your items, know how to use the cashier machine. That's pretty much it.
yeah. So no one's bagging your stuff ever. Even if you ask them, they'll be like, no, you can do that. So it's what they'll do is they'll scan your stuff and stick it. You put your stuff on like one side, they scan it, they stick it on the other side, just like America. But it's a smaller system because it's in a city, so they don't have this whole like conveyor belt basically. But it's the polite thing to do is start bagging as soon as they scan it quickly, as soon as you can, and then they'll ask you to pay. You pay, and you try to finish bagging before the next person comes up. And sometimes they'll be able to the cashier will try to keep the two things separate. Not always, but yeah, they're not there to bag your stuff. They're not there to
They're not going to dote on you. You have the responsibility of putting your stuff on, paying, getting your stuff off, and moving out as quickly and seamlessly as possible.
Yeah.
But also the bags. We should mention that the bags are often made of corn plastic because there's a anti-plastic bag thing going around, which is awesome.
I think it's a law, by the way.
I think it is a law, yeah. Well, I think it is a law, but often in southern Italy, sometimes they don't abide by the rules, but Rome does. But also there's typically a 10-cent bag charge. So locals usually bring their bags. So if you're charged 10 cents, it's for the bags.
And they will ask you, they won't just charge you. They will say, do you want a bag? And if you don't speak Italian, they'll hold up the bag. And then you can say 1, 2, or 3, depending how many you need. Because if you just say, yes, I want a bag, please. Even if you have 70 items,
they will give you one bag.
One bag. So you have to be very clear about, yes, 4 bags, please. But actually, it's good that you brought up they are biodegradable, because if you are in an Airbnb, your Airbnb host will almost certainly ask you to please abide by the trash system, which is the plastic is separate, the aluminum, and usually the aluminum and plastic go together. Sometimes they don't, depending which city you're in. But aluminum, plastic, cardboard is usually separate.
Glass is separate.
Glass is separate.
And then the compost and then the regular trash.
Yeah, the compost is separate, and then your regular trash. And the regular trash should not be that much.
Right. Most of your things should have gone into all of those other different categories.
Yeah, because a lot of times almost all the plastic is biodegradable, but it's all recycled. The cans, all that kind of stuff. So really in your regular trash, you shouldn't have very much. But when you throw away anything that's biodegradable, if you are in Rome, almost always you'll probably just bring it to the street and you'll walk around until you find the proper disposal.
Depending on where you're staying, and if you're at a hotel or an Airbnb for a short amount of time.
I was thinking Airbnb specifically.
If you're there for a long time, yeah.
You shouldn't be. I mean, you probably won't be eating
shouldn't be taking out your own trash either.
Yeah, I was thinking you probably won't be in an Airbnb or a hotel room eating groceries either.
That's true.
You might be. We have. We've made sandwiches on a radiator.
And French fries.
But no, the reason I bring it up is if you're going to throw away the umido, as it's called, the compost, it has to be in a biodegradable bag. So the ones from the grocery store do work. They feel different. Like the biodegradable ones almost feel more silky, and the plastic bags feel like
quite a nice texture,
bag.
actually. The organic bags, yeah.
Just don't leave anything in there too long; they will eat through the bag.
Yeah, and this really goes back to the thing that I think now we're preaching it, aren't we? The kindness and respectfulness I think people need to have whenever they travel. It's a pain in the butt to suddenly have to do all of these different trash things when you don't expect it, especially when you're on vacation. But it really does make a huge difference, and it's something that I think is pretty important.
Yeah, I mean I think that's it. It's like trying without getting too preachy, because nobody likes that. But it is trying to, when you are visiting or something like that, especially in Airbnb. And I say that because sometimes you are going to be, the Airbnb is run by a company that owns 200 apartments in Rome, but sometimes it is, somebody has their mom's apartment that they're trying to rent out for some extra money, and they don't really want to show up there after your week and realize that you just left trash everywhere and be like, oh, they never took this out. It's like right down. I asked them to take this out. And I know because some people do have that. It's hard. It's hard to talk about this without it being a polarizing conversation. Airbnb has become a polarizing conversation because so many people expect it to be like a hotel, like, they're going to come and change your sheets every day and this and that. But it's like, well, they don't. They give you basically it's cheaper, and they give you a kitchen, but they don't change your sheets and they don't take out your trash. And you are expected to do a little bit of cleanup when you leave. Like, Darcy and I typically do a big cleanup when we leave. I mean, we scrub things, we clean everything. It's just because we know that there's a cleaning fee. And sometimes we've been to places that they return the cleaning fee if it's cleaned well enough, if they don't have to bring in a maid or cleaning service. And we like that because we're like, that's a €25 cleaning fee. We'd love that back. But also we know that the person, especially once we meet the person and realize like, oh, you're not some conglomerate. You're you're a college student who you're allowed to use your aunt and uncle's apartment to make a little extra side cash while you go to classes. Yeah, we're not going to saddle you with any sort of cleaning if we can avoid it.
I think in the best version, especially with the way you and I travel, in the best version, we are either renting an Airbnb from a regular person who's just trying to be nice, working hard, or at a small hotel where, again, it's probably owned by a family, not by a large conglomerate. And when we travel, we really do just try to be as tidy as possible, and especially leave everything in the best order and the best way that we can.
Yeah, it's only because part of it is just, it is also the day and age of reviews. If you're on Airbnb, you get a review if you stay, and you give a review if you stay. So we like good reviews. We like people to, because we also are, we're a little older. We're 26. How old are we?
We're 26.
I always forget. But when we first started traveling, like, years ago, 21, 22, 20, it's a bit of a risk for an Airbnb owner to be like, oh, I'll have these two 20-year-olds come and stay at my house for a month and, hopefully not ruin something. So we've had our Airbnb account now for a while. And, it's like every time I don't really want to, use Airbnb, we try to, house sit or something. But if you have to, it is, it's just that little extra bit where people feel a little bit happier being like, oh my God, thankfully their reviews are all about how clean they left the apartment. I have nothing to worry about with these people, rather than the, review being something else. And that's just on the topic of Airbnbs. We will probably talk about that at some other point, because that could be an interestingly in-depth episode,
Yes.
as long as we don't make it too biased one way or the other. But no, on that last sort of bit on groceries is simply that, just sort of be open to just a different experience, basically. There are big grocery stores. Rome has a big grocery stores just like any other town or city. They are not always in the easiest to reach areas, because they are the places that, they needed to have a bunch of space. So usually if you're going to be in an Airbnb or a hotel, your closest grocery store is probably a tiny little corner store, alimentari, or almost every grocery store chain like Conad and Co-op, or Coop as it's pronounced here. They have city versions. So it's Conad City, and InCoop is the city version. Mm-hmm. And all of these will have a reduced selection, like we already mentioned, but they will still have the important ingredients. But if you need specialty items, you can find that at a bigger grocery store.
Or the fun little markets. It's a bit more of a pain to go to the fun little markets, but it's so worth it.
It is. No, absolutely. And if you are, by the way, we mentioned a couple times that if you are celiac or you are gluten-free, almost every grocery store, big and small, has a gluten-free section. It is definitely become, in the 4 or 5 years we've been living here on and off, it's become more and more common to see a bigger and more devoted gluten-free section. It's become a little bit more important. So don't expect the best. I will be honest. Do not expect cutting-edge gluten-free technology. They are behind the curve. It's like the pasta's made with corn and or rice. But it does exist if you need something that is gluten-free. It does absolutely exist. It's just not as tasty as some other international options, perhaps. And is there anything else you want to talk about?
No, I don't think so. I think that pretty much sums up our food, our opinions on food, our little bits of insight. Yeah.
And while recording this, we're at the hour and 20-minute mark before editing it down.
Oh, goodness.
We realized we probably won't get around to drinks this episode, because otherwise we're just asking you to sit down and listen to a 3-hour podcast. So instead, what we're going to do is publish this one, make a small accompaniment to this one about eating at restaurants, and eating at sort of any sort of more traditional not street food basically, because we didn't talk about that much in this, and we realized maybe a little quick 10-minute, 15-minute podcast might be helpful just to quickly go over some of the things to expect when you eat out at restaurants. And then we're going to publish the one about drinks. And so instead of having one massive 3.5 hour podcast, we'll have 3 kind of big ones, but also one small one in there. So 2 big ones and a small one. But I think that's everything.
I think that's it. Yeah. So stay tuned for the next ones.
And thank you so much for your time. And thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Darcy, for joining us as a co-host.
Thank you. I'm a co-host now, everybody. Yay!
And thank you guys again so much for your time. And we hope to have you back at the next episode.